Hi, and welcome to Soul and Science, a podcast on uniting Western psychology with Eastern wisdom. My name is Nyana, and I'm a psychotherapist residing in India and in conversation with Ardaas ji, who is an international trainer in yogic wisdom, and he is from Portugal. We invite you to embark on a profound exploration of the human journey with us. We integrate scientific insights into the mind with Eastern wisdom on life's polarities, paradoxes, and boundless nature to uncover a deeper understanding of our existence. Season 1, we begin with the exploration of relationships and the part that leads back to the self. Why relationships? We are constantly engaging in relationships with everything around us, from people to our environment. While we usually focus on relationships between two people, the most profound relationship we have is with ourselves. How many of us are truly aware of this relationship we have? Do we nurture it, trust, love, and respect it? Or are we living in fear and rejection of self, waiting to be validated externally? So join us as we go deep dive into the relationship with our mind, our body, and our spirit. So with that, I'm going to ask Ardaas ji to introduce himself.
Sadnam, Satseva, and Sadnam, everyone. Thank you for coming and listening to us and maybe seeing us as well if you're in YouTube. And I am Ardaas Singh. I am originally from Spain. I live in Portugal, and I have been a yogi all my life, even though a long time I denied it. But I was born in a yogi family, and now here I am as a yoga teacher and trainer. And I love psychology and I love Western approaches to science, to medicine, to humanities, to education, to all these things that the yogic wisdom has explored in a different way. Very ancient texts and very ancient practices have explored things that now the Western world is waking up to. And I love to combine both and explore how they are connected. So I'm very happy to do this podcast with Satseva, the other name that Nyana has. And yes, today we have Karma and Dharma. And last week we talked about emotions in general, but the very end of the podcast, we introduced this concept of forgiveness. And I think, excuse me, that topic connects very well with today because when we experience karma, and karma can be both good and bad, okay? Because very often when we talk about karma, we talk about like bad karma. Generally, like it's become like a fashion. No, something's happening to you. It's like, oh, bad karma, man. So it's become like a fashion, and we believe that this, let's say, something bad has happened to me, and then we either don't forgive the one who has caused that trouble to us, or if we have been the cause of the incident or the accident, whatever happened, then I feel guilty and therefore I don't forgive myself for that. And so I think karma is going to be very, very connected to the concept of forgiveness. And in the last podcast, I introduced this methodology within the yogic understanding that there is a recognition and there's an acceptance and there is an agreement to what happened before the, let's say, the karmic charge associated to that event is released. So when you can forgive, yeah, when you can go through this whole 3 steps, recognize, accept, and agree, and end up in the gratitude of having completed the process, then the karmic charge is released. But I did, that was like the last 5 minutes of the podcast, and I thought it wasn't enough time to honor the concept of forgiveness. And I also wanted to ask the psychological approach to that. So I would like to start today, if it's possible. Satseva, can you tell us what's the psychological approach to forgiveness? How do you psychologists help a client who comes with a deep issue, whether it's feelings of guilt or feelings of a victim? How do you come from there? How do you move from there?
Um, when somebody comes in with that, and I think that's such an important part because it comes down to our narrative and our filter of our life that I'm a victim. and this has happened to me. And a lot of time it comes from the space of, oh, this is my bad karma. And therefore look at karma more as a punishment rather than something that I can learn from. And so when I label myself a victim, I'm stuck there forever. I'm so bad, I've done something terrible, I cannot be forgiven. And the term bad that we pick up, and usually we pick it up in childhood as we see it, um, and that continues to remain the narrative. It's really interesting because we want to hold on to that narrative, right? And forgiveness, as we go through that journey of healing, of really looking at whether that's the truth of that story, that you're bad, or that um, nothing about that label can ever change, right? You're able to see that you're the one who's judging and punishing, and who would you be if you're able to let go of that? So while we
Well,
don't,
able to see, you were just saying able to see that that's the recognition, isn't it?
yes,
That's
that's
the
the part
beginning.
where you
That's the
recognize.
first step. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second is to accept that, hey, I took on that belief, right?
So
And
which are the steps from the psychological perspective?
so, I mean, we don't really have specific steps to forgiveness because we leave that whether to where the client wants to go with it. We don't say you need to forgive or not forgive. And in fact, you'll hear a lot of spaces that say you don't need to forgive, right? But where we get the a client to see, again, depending on where they come from, whether it's, for example, sexual abuse, right? When actually you find that the person says it is something that I did wrong, that this happened to me, right? That we are able to bring forgiveness into letting go that it was my fault. And that is a deep journey of healing. So it is, if you look at it, a recognition and acceptance and an agreement in a lot of ways, as you have said, are the steps from a yogic perspective. But really here it is the journey of unlayering how the belief that was taken as that it's my fault serves the person or serve that person there. How is it continuing to create pain, and how releasing that would transform their narrative to something called the truth, and that they're able to do so from a perspective of neutrality, from a
Can
space
they
of
truly reach? Because you did mention, sorry for interrupting, you did mention that you don't necessarily need the forgiveness in the therapeutic process, but can you really get to the neutrality without forgiveness? I mean, can somebody get to true healing without letting go of the victim attitude or mentality?
No, it's not. But the neutrality comes when we start bringing in the observer, as we call the true self, into the therapeutic space, or the compassion into the therapeutic space, and we're able to see it from the experience of neutrality and juxtaposing it, saying that, would you say that about someone else? Right? And that you're able to bring in compassion, A, for the self, which is consciousness towards the self, the witness into the room with the self, and then saying, okay, so does that mean then this is the truth? So we come back to the notion of truth. And then we take away the label or the story or the narrative, which is the belief that they made. And then if that belief does not exist, then is there any forgiveness beyond A, to the self, and then B, to the other? Because in these cases, the person is looking at themselves being at fault and they did something wrong. And when you're able to heal that, then there is a certain amount of release, which then allows the person to not live with that victim consciousness anymore. There is another consciousness that comes into space, and that's the neutrality that we bring in, the observer, the compassion, the heart
I
center.
think I think I see what you are saying. I think I get you. So, from what I understanding of what you're saying is that, in a way, when you change the consciousness to your role in whatever happened, you recognize the truth. You recognize that actually there was nothing to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, there's no need for forgiveness because you never did anything wrong. Therefore, why should you even forgive yourself? Is that it? Right.
Yeah, and that's very profound because it's by design. When there is a victim, there's also that belief that it's my fault and I did something bad, therefore this happened and I deserved it. And those narratives that go along, which actually cause a lot more of the suffering um, that the person then lives with constantly. And then we're moving the consciousness from the judge and the inner critic to the compassion of neutrality, or what we call the true self and the observer that is present in the person. But then now they're able to operate from that as well, rather than just the mind stories that are going on about, yeah, I was bad and this happened to me because I'm it's and then in some cases, especially in our country, it was my karma. And then the story of karma begins, and the whole understanding of karma, judgment, punishment becomes very misunderstood,
Definitely. Yeah.
right? And so we become almost passive recipients of that, rather than understand that I can change my karma, and my karma is essentially also the narratives and these beliefs that I have taken on that continue to create a pattern of pain and suffering and programming in my life that can change. And that the more
Right.
I'm aware of these patterns and programming, the more I can sort of evolve with consciousness to change that, to change the behavior that comes from the compulsion of that story. Right. And then so I'm just going to take a step further and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Real choice, right? Um, and that is where I see a lot stuff where psychology focuses a lot on reaction versus response. And reactions are more automatic. They're based on emotions that are driven with immediate feelings, past experiences. They're usually defensive, or I'm attacking because I'm going into my sympathetic system of danger, which is flight and fight, or then I go into shutdown, which is freeze. They are all reactions to danger. Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Versus,
And let's just say that when you react, you're automatically creating karma by definition.
yes.
Right.
And because we're doing it from an automatic sense, it's coming from an old limited belief or narrative, and so I'm still stuck in that pattern, so my reaction is still automatic and unintentional and unconscious.
Correct.
And if you remember last time we talked about the window of tolerance, which is you're neither hyper or hyper arousal, but you're in your sympathetic parasympathetic system, which is your, sort of your ability to be calm, centered, open, where you're balanced enough to make choices. You can take a pause, you can take a deep breath, come back into your center, and then you can choose a response. And
Might
a
be worth reminding us what this tolerance is, because some people may not have listened to the other podcast. So,
Yeah, so all our bodies react from our nervous system. Everything reacts from our nervous system, from what we understand in psychology and neuroscience and things. And that we have reactive, which is our hyper and hyper arousal, which is our sympathetic, parasympathetic. So if we are hyper aroused, then we're basically screaming, yelling, shouting, and all of it is to protect us from danger, because by design, it's our it's our coping to survive. But when we are operating, and we all have something called a window of tolerance, and most of our life we need to learn to develop and strengthen our window of tolerance, also called resilience in a lot of people, is essentially the part of us that is grounded, that is centered, that is living outside of an automatic, unconscious, reactive state, to the ability to pause and response, because I have that much resilience or a calm nervous system that is not triggered, because I'm able to be in the present moment. I don't immediately go back into the past and say that my mind has created already this narrative that this is what happened in the past and therefore I'm going to react. But I can take a pause, and my nervous system is strong enough to take a pause at this point of time. I've strengthened my nervous system to say, okay, this is what's happening. Is this really what this person is trying to do? How do I choose to respond? And will my response be aligned to who I am, my values, etc. So it gives me the ability to pause between my what I'm feeling and my response. Otherwise, I
So
feel something and I
let me summarize what you are saying from what I hear to see if I am aligned to what you're saying. So something happens and that may trigger in us some reaction based on my personal experiences, past narratives. And that reaction that I do from there, which can be a hyper reaction, for example, that's a karma, that's creation, that's creating karma. But if I increase my level of tolerance, I can see what is happening and notice myself being triggered. But before allowing that action to come out of that reaction to come out of that triggering, I can stop, breathe, take bring consciousness to what is happening, and from there choosing an appropriate response. Correct?
absolutely.
Okay. So let's just bring the concept of karma and dharma here.
Yes.
When it's a reaction, it's definitely karmic. When you stop and you bring consciousness to the event and you are capable to choose your response, the response can be both karmic or dharmic.
Yes.
Okay, so our reaction is automatically karmic, but when you stop and choose to respond, that choice doesn't necessarily mean it's dharmic. It can be karmic as well. But I'm thinking maybe we are going too far away, because last week we were talking about emotions and we started by defining emotions.
Mhm.
And because, what are we talking about? So I believe, like you mentioned before, there is a lot of misunderstandings around karma, and it could easily, for whatever understanding people have on karma, they may be hearing this and understanding it in a skewed way. So would it be worth defining first what karma is and how it operates?
I think you can go ahead and help us with that, and I'll tell you how it is skewed.
Right, definitely, absolutely. Good. All right, so I think it's important to define a little bit how the yogic understanding of karma works, because many people think that it's just, the punishments that I have to receive in my life, kind of like God being. We were just having a lovely discussion just before we went online about, God with a whip on the clouds, and a sadistic being enjoying how we suffer. But I think the main thing why many people stop believing in God is they cannot understand how there is so much suffering in the world. And they say, how God, would you say is all compassionate, would allow this to happen? Okay, so the suffering that we have to endure in our lives is linked to our karmas.
Mhm.
But not only the suffering, also the rewards that we receive. That's also due to karma. So karma is both good and bad. So and karma can operate in three levels according to the yogic teachings. It can be on the level of action, on the level of word, or on the level of thoughts. So
Mhm.
if I do a bad action against you, if I slap you, someday someone will have to slap me back. So the law of karma basically says any action has an equal and opposite reaction. That sounds very much like physics, doesn't it? An equal and opposite reaction, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe in a week, maybe in a year, maybe next lifetime. So karma is when I slap someone, that's going to plant a seed into my future Ardaas, and someday somebody will have to slap me. And that's may come in another life. So when I live this life, I will have this seed with me, and this seed will travel to the next life and it will have to manifest at some point. Okay. If I don't slap somebody, if somebody say a bad word, if I tell you a nasty thing to you, then somebody in the future will have to say a nasty thing to me. It's really equal and opposite. But also on the level of actions, words, and thoughts. So if I think something bad about you or about anyone, somebody will think something bad about me. Okay. Now, it also works the other way in the good aspect. So if I do something good to somebody, somebody is asking for help and I go and offer my help. No, somebody in the highway, the car breaks down, and all the cars are passing by and this is a dangerous. Is It's a dangerous situation, but you decide to stop, to help, to move the car to the side so it's not in danger. You did a good action that plants a seed of a good action being done to me, similar, equally, but in the other direction. No? So somebody will do something good for me. If I say something nice to you or to someone, then somebody will say something nice to me. If I think good thoughts about you, then somebody will think good thoughts about me. And I always say somebody because it doesn't have to be the same person. So it goes out of you and it comes back to you through a different channel. So the law of karma, this law that whenever something is done on any of these three levels, and then it has to come back. This law is what we say the fairest of all the laws possible, the most fair, the most aligned with justice. So there is no judgment here. There is no morality here. There is just an equal and opposite response. So if I slap someone, there is no being in the universe saying, that was an evil thing. You have to, be punished for that. No, it's just you did an action. That action will come back to you. That's it. There is not even a morality there. There's just a concept that is coming back. I'm not saying there is no morality. I'm not saying that the morality doesn't exist. I'm just saying that in the way that the law of karma operates, it's just more like a law, like the law of gravity. You let something go and it falls down. So you do an action, it comes back. Very, very basic. Now, the concept of reincarnation is intimately linked to this, so I have to mention it. When does a being reincarnate? When a being has karmas that are unfulfilled or uncompleted. So if I say something nice and I slap somebody, I have now 2 karmas. And you can imagine how many karmas we accumulate during the day, but also how many things happen to us during the day. So, there's a constant flow. But if by the end of my existence on this planet, in this body, in this life, by the day I die, if I still have some karmas unfulfilled, then these karmas will come with me to the next life. So I have to be reincarnated to complete these karmas. So the idea of reincarnation, it only happens because we have karmas unfulfilled, unfinished. That's mostly true. I'm not going to go into avatars or some special beings. I'm just going to go in this way. Yeah. So the process, actually, the path of yoga, the design of yoga is so that we can be liberated. And when we utilize the word liberated here, we mean specifically liberated from this jail, this prison of all these karmas that we have pending. And so there is a number of practices that we can do in yoga, and the very act of devotion and prayer and service and meditation, this is already just doing that is already cleansing our karmas. And the objective of yoga is to be fully cleansed of all the karmas so that you don't have to reincarnate. That maybe we don't have to go into that path, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's connected to the law of karma. So when somebody comes to this lifetime and they experience lots of suffering, that's just a manifestation of karmas from past life. And you can say, well, how could you allow that? How can you life somebody going through that? Well, we don't know the past life that we had, and we don't know how much karma did we accumulate from last lifetime. So in a way, what we can do is in this lifetime, we observe the things that are happening and think, well, what could have triggered this thing that has happening, and what can I learn from this? So, for example, if I am in the street and something happens and somebody slaps me, right? Or somebody steps on my toes in the bus, for example, it could be an accident, right? Somebody steps on my toes. Okay, that's just my karma. I probably stepped onto somebody's toes, and now this person is stepping on mine. Now, what does that mean? Am I going to get angry? Am I going to react? Am I going to push him? Am I going to step on his toes? Because then if I do that, I am reinforcing the karma that I already had. And that karma is not fulfilled and therefore it doesn't go away. It actually may come stronger. If somebody steps on my toes and that the pain wakes me up, and because I was thinking something else, the pain, whoop, I'm stepped on my toes. Okay, what does that mean? It's just my karma. And this person who stepped on my toes is just the vehicle for my karma. They are not guilty of anything. This comes with the concept of forgiveness. They are not guilty of anything. It's just, this is the way the karma had to come. Somebody had to step on my toes, and it was this person, right? They are just the vehicle. And if I can allow through this increasing the level of tolerance, like you were saying, I can just stop and notice that and not react at that moment and choose to let it go. I can learn something from that, and I can liberate myself from that karma.
So you liberate
So
your from
just
what?
just one more thing. So in the old texts of yoga, you will find codes of behavior like ahimsa. It's a very common, well-known concept, not to harm other beings. And you can read them from a moralistic perspective, or you can read them like, look, young yogi, you want to be liberated, right? Well, first of all, don't create more karma. And if you harm other beings, you're going to be creating a lot of karma. So ahimsa, don't harm others. And that will be the beginning of stopping. First of all, before cleaning the karma that you already have, stop creating. And that's the path of Dharma. That's what we would call Dharma. When you align yourself with a path in which you are not creating karma, and you're aligned with this natural intelligence that is guiding this universe and nature, which we can be aligned with, and we can have a harmonious life. Then that's the path of Dharma. And when we are in that path and we choose to act from that place, we are not creating karma.
And
Does
how?
that sound like you would like you understood it, or
Yes, yes. So from what I am understanding is that uh, when you do a behavior, thought, word, or action, it's going to have its equal and opposite reaction, and that is karma. Uh,
yes,
and karma changes when you're able to pause and choose a response that has a more dharmic quality
it
to
can
it.
change, yeah, depending on your response, yeah. Which is what we call karam. Karam can also mean kindness. So
Mhm.
there is a kindness to the karma when it's something happens, and maybe dramatic. You may go through a crisis, you may be in pain and suffer, but then as you learn through that experience, you appreciate something that you got out of that. That's like the kind side of karma, the kindness that the karma gives me. I think that many people can go back and think about their life, something that happened in the past that was horrible when they were going through, and realize that they are now today who they are because of that. Whatever strength, greed, compassion, courage they learn in life through going through difficult situations. So there is a gift also in going through those experiences.
Right. Yeah, because I think a lot of the suffering is related to our, and correct me if I'm wrong, in our culture specifically, this belief that, oh, it's my karma, and so there's nothing I can do about it. And to look at karma as a punishment.
Right? And
Where,
there's nothing to do about it as well.
yeah, and this
So
futile,
I am passive.
I'm passive, and that's where the
Yeah.
victim story comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that there is this God above that's doling out this judgment
Right.
that you deserve this karma because, and that I have nothing to do about it. And so now I don't have a choice, the choicelessness.
Right.
And I see that a lot because a lot of the suffering is in the powerlessness and the choicelessness of what I'm receiving or experiencing as bad or karma, and feeling like I have nothing that I can do, the powerlessness, the choicelessness, I can't change it, I'm stuck, and this is going to be my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas all the karma or whatever the things that are causing suffering in this life, what I'm hearing, are thought, word, and action which are incomplete from a previous life. You're here to complete them and learn what a lesson. And the lesson is not necessarily a punishment, it is a lesson in growing towards consciousness, right? To move away from unconscious actions and behaviors to more conscious. behaviors, that if this karma doesn't wake you up, what is going to, or if this blow in life is not going to make you self-reflect as to why is this happening, or this is a repeated pattern and I'm going to continue to create, I'm going to continue to be conscious.
Yes, and that lesson comes back with you when you come back. If you come back in another life, whatever lessons you have learned, you already have that wisdom.
You already
So
have
that's, yeah.
that's so important because we don't recognize that we already have the wisdom and
Hmm.
we already have what we need, largely. And a lot of what we need to do is to able to sit and reflect that this with consciousness, that these are my own created thought, word, and action. And this thought, word, and action is related to a narrative and a story about this thing to do with God. And then if I were to transform that, what is possible?
And this is the thing as well, because it's easier to blame God
Yeah.
than to recognize that something came from you. Maybe not from this lifetime. We don't remember. I think the fact that we don't remember past lifetimes is actually a blessing. It's actually a gift. If we remember everything that we did wrong in other lifetimes, or like some people will say, I would love to live 500 years. Well, you know, we struggle so much with the mistakes that we did in this lifetime already. It's already so hard, and many people, they go through life remembering very sternly the things that they did wrong, and sometimes they give much less emphasis to the things that they did right, but they particularly remember the things that they did wrong, or that something very wrong happened to them, and that takes more um, weight in their life than the things that the blessings. We say count your blessings, not your curses. But the thing is, most people actually carry their curses like a very heavy load. Imagine if you remembered the last 10, 20 lifetimes and everything that who knows what we did? Who knows what I did in another lifetime? I don't want to know. Some people go into this fantastic fantasy of going and past life regression and all that hypnosis and trying to remember who they are, and then they can figure out, if it even happens, because a lot of it is fantasy, but if they even have an access, who knows what you uncover. Do you want to get into that mud? Because it's already hard to deal with the issues in this lifetime to go back to the others. So the thing is, when we are in this lifetime and we don't remember anything, one very easy option is to blame God and
Mm.
say, no, yeah, it's God's fault that this is happening, and not take responsibility for karma. But I think if you contemplate and you consider and you are open to the possibility that this law of karma, which so many societies and so many cultures speak about, if it's even possible, can I observe it? And many people will observe that there is also like karma express. You know, like you say a bad word and then you stab your toe on the furniture, right? Immediately. And it's like karma is like, okay, let's not take it to the next life. Let's put it right here. And that's a good way to realize as well. Yeah, karma can be very, very immediately realized. And so if you recognize, well, karma exists, well, then all these things that I was blaming God for, maybe it's not God to blame. Maybe it's just the consequence of my previous actions.
I mean, of course, psychology, we don't look at karma, right? Even though it's, when I'm coming from a psychology space, I'm coming with this predominantly being Indian, and it's such a big part of our culture
Right.
and right. I don't know if this is some. I'm sure there is. It's of some sort in every religion where you talk that God's punishing me for what I have done and forgive me, God, for my sins. And it's everywhere that this God is punishing me for something. And it's really interesting because the work of what we do is essentially to bring awareness to our patterns and our stories that are causing us this pain and suffering, that's making us behave in repeated patterns that are automatic and unconscious, which is actually in a lot of ways bringing you awareness of unconscious behaviors and patterns which you're creating thought, word, and action, which may be causing harm to yourself or to someone else.
Well, that's the thing, no? Imagine God just created the law of gravity and you figured it out, right? You do your experiments and figure out the law of gravity. Imagine now, okay, I'm going to jump through my window And then when I crash on the ground, I will say, God, why did you punish me, crushing me? God say, well, nobody asked you to jump off the window, right? So the law is there, and the law is universal, and the law is fair, and the law of karma operates in the same way. It's unescapable. But then if you figure out that these things are like this, and even if you don't believe in the law of karma, even from a perspective of psychology, your attitude is going to have an impact in the world. And that impact is going to be reciprocated. So if you are with a positive attitude and, with a good, kind, and approachable, uh, mm, like, I don't know, like contact with people, if you can go from that place to other people, approachable and kind and happy and joyful, it's much more likely that you're going to receive the same thing back. So let's just take it like that, even if we don't want to call it karma, right? But just like you would not jump off the window because you know you would crash, when you learn that the law of karma operates like that, wouldn't anyone be like wanting to, of course, I don't want to go into reaction anymore. I want to do the response. I want to be able to give me that pause to be able to choose the response that I want to give. Because I don't want to jump off the window, because I know if I do the reaction, I know what's going to come back to me. And that's another thing. If I did something wrong, I mess up. And today I was triggered, and I couldn't stop myself. I was not tolerant enough, and I couldn't stop myself, and I did the action, and I harmed somebody. Okay? Well, that karma is going to come back to me for sure. There's no that's going to happen. Okay. But if now I go and I feel guilty about it, and I start punishing myself, and like the Christians, we say mea culpa, and we have to hit yourself with a whip 3 or 5 times for every sin that you commit. Well, punishing yourself, that's more karma, because that's hitting yourself. That's also karma. So not only you have the karma of whatever you did wrong, but you also now have the karma of hitting yourself and not loving yourself and being bad with yourself. So you are creating extra karma. So the concept of trying to redeem ourselves from our karmas through self-punishment is actually the opposite, and maybe even worse. Does that make sense?
Yes. But it's also what we as human beings learn, that if you make a mistake, you get punished. You see, that's how school and parenting and all of that works. And then it becomes a conditioned learned behavior that when
Not necessarily, but that's the most common, yeah?
most common, it does.
I don't believe in punishment. I think there is a lot of parents nowadays who don't believe in punishment to help the education of the child. But I understand that's very common. Yeah.
Predominantly, that's, I mean, we are seeing more conscious parents. That's, I'm not saying that isn't true,
Yeah.
but I'm saying predominantly that has been the nature of which we are conditioned, right? To
Yes.
behaviors that are quote unquote expected or
Yes.
considered right. And that's then what we start doing with ourselves, right? That becomes your inner critic, and then that's
Correct.
the sort of cycle, or the cycle of self flagellation, self dislike, self blame, self belittling that continues. That gives an emotional response. Emotional response gives a reaction, and then that's a lot of what we're stuck in. We're stuck in the way we perceive the world through those filters, then, of those narratives and beliefs. But when we become aware of it, then we have a choice that I don't need to believe this about myself or treat myself like that anyway. And then when I change that, I change the perspective as well as the way I treat myself and others.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's the path of transformation that
Yes.
we see in therapy. How do you relate that to what we share, to dharma then? And what is dharma? Because we're always talking about karma largely. Very few people talk about dharma, right? And
Yes.
again, dharma is quite misunderstood, right? Dharma is considered duty.
Right. Right.
And I don't think it is as small and contained and passive as duty. So I would like to kind of put it out, because a lot of times we see people doing it saying it's my duty, it's my duty, but they're doing it from a karmic place, which is a lot of resentment, hate, dislike. There's so much of pain and suffering going into that duty. But I'm like, how is this helping? How is this you doing your duty? How is this helpful to you if it's causing you more pain and suffering? And it's so I'm just out of curiosity, what is a clear, simple yogic understanding of dharma then? That
Yeah, I will have to check what the word duty means, because how do we use that word? And I think it implies a lot of responsibilities. And if duty also implies if you don't do it, something bad is going to happen, right?
no, it is serving without let me actually, as we speak, look for the meaning. How about
Sure, look for the definition. We'll be informed in our conversation.
um so it says a task or action that's required to perform as a part of one's job or a moral or legal obligation.
Who has the legal or moral obligation on what I have to do in my life?
Well, that's how uh, we are taught
Yeah,
by.
yeah, yeah. But that's the thing. We use a word into a context that I'm not sure is applicable. Like, this is not our job. This is our lives. But I like the word duty, actually. So let's take it on. Um, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, the one of the oldest, most beautiful texts from Indian literature, and
Love how Ardaas ji, you from Portugal, sitting there, bring up the
yes,
Gita.
I think if we had to summarize Krishna's teachings uh, in one sentence, would be do your duty, in a way. So it's funny because that's a text, it's a very old text, and in a way, it's the culmination of Indian philosophy, Indian morality, Indian teachings on wisdom, and also about yoga. So this is a text where one of the first texts where the concept of yoga is introduced. So for me as a yogi is very important. Now, Krishna says, do your duty. And what does that mean? What would that mean? And what is Dharma? Okay, so let's take it from there. We say where there is karma, there is no dharma. Where there is dharma, there is no karma. And what is this dharma thing? Well, okay, you can try to escape God, but this is kind of like try to escape the law of gravity. The law of gravity is there anyway. It's just going to affect you whether you believe in it or not. I may not believe in it, but if I drop the pen, it's going to fall, right? So there is such a thing as God. It's just that the way we describe it, it's different for every person, and some religions give it up. How do you say that? Uh, Anthropomorphized form. So it's just like they give a form of a human being in the clouds, whatever. But there is a force that has created this universe that organizes it and destroys. God, yeah, generating, organizing, and destroying. And it's an intelligent force. And I like to relate to God as an intelligence that has put everything in order, has created all these laws as well. Not a lot of them, but law of karma is one of them, and everything is functioning in a certain way, in a very naturally, in a very harmonious way, let's say. So naturally in a harmonious way, which means that things by their nature are harmonious. But we humans, the moment that we leave our natures, and ego is a lot about going away from our nature. The moment that the ego is built, we don't work according to nature. When we see animals, they are responding according to their nature. There is no ego involved. But in humans, the moment we bring the ego, we stop functioning according to nature. So the moment we go away from nature, it's like coming out of this synchrony with this. Let me put it with music. Let me put a metaphor with music. There is an orchestra playing, and naturally, every instrument is tuned in, and every instrument is playing harmonically. And then I want to be a little bit different because I want to do my own thing, and I want everybody to notice me. That's the ego. So I have my own, let's say, violin, and I'm going to start doing my own little thing there. Now, at first, it may still be in harmony with the nature of the orchestra, and the music may even be enjoyable. And actually, the ego loves that. Oh, I can enjoy this beautiful music. But then the more that we go into our own music, the more we forget about the orchestra and we just want to perform. And then that's creating karma, by the way. Yeah, now we are creating karma the moment that we are doing our own thing. Now, there is such a thing as a harmony, and there is such a thing as a wholeness, a holistic vision of everything around us. And we have the capacity, because by our own nature, we have the capacity to tune in to this harmony, which is guided by this primary intelligence, God, and live in a beautiful symphony. Or try to create our own music away from this symphony, but doing the concert at the same time, and create a cacophony of sound that is going to be disturbing for everybody to watch or hear, let's say, and disturbing for ourselves. So that's suffering. When we are going away from the harmony, there is a path that is harmonious. When we go away from it, we start to do our own things because we think we know better, because, ego. And then as we don't even tune in with the orchestra anymore, we tune in to ourselves and whatever we like, whatever frequency we like, that frequency goes away, and then we are in dissonance and in disharmony with everything. That's the path of karma. Dharma is when we come back to listening to this harmony and the intelligence that is behind this harmony. And if we listen, we will perceive there is one thing we call hukam, which is like a command, God's command, that is telling us what we need to do to go back to harmony. When we follow this command, follow this hukam, which we can perceive it sometimes is more like an intuitive perception. It's not like we don't read it anywhere. It's more like an inner feeling, but we have to learn to tune into that feeling. When we can perceive that hukam through that intuitive perception, hukam is the God's command, then as we allow ourselves, whatever actions come out of following that hukam, those are dharmic actions and they do not generate karma. So where there is dharma, there is no karma.
Mm.
It's difficult to explain what dharma is, but I would, summarizing, when we align ourselves with this intelligence that is guiding the universe, and when we go back to our own nature, our true self, not the ego, and that means peeling off all the layers that we discussed on the very first podcast when we were talking about the mind, peeling off all the layers, going back to our true essence, going back to the third podcast when we were talking about the soul and the essence. When we tune into that essence, we are much more capable of hearing that harmony and knowing what we have to do to go back to that harmony. We tune into the orchestra, the nature around us, and we know the melody we have to do. And when you do that melody has not a consequence. So those actions that come from there, those words that you say, those thoughts that you think in that line, they don't create karma, and you don't have to pay for it, let's say.
Right. So what I'm hearing, and would it be safe to say, um,
By the way, this is my understanding of Dharma, okay? Probably another teacher will say it in another way. This is the way I will say it. And the way I say it today, maybe tomorrow I will say it differently, but right now, this is how I'm tuning into it.
yeah, no, I think that's helpful to think of it as tuning in, um, because I'm trying to look at it from a psychological perspective as to what we do in therapy. And what we want people to become aware of is their intuition, right? And to listen more, because we're always in conflict between the mind and the heart,
Right?
right? And that's the big struggle, the inner conflict,
Right.
right? It's the ego, the super ego, the id, and then there is this intuition, uh, and nobody's talking to anybody. Yeah, and that's the conflict inside. And how do you become aligned and attuned? And yet sometimes I'm like, you know what? When I hear my inner voice, I just feel calm and I know it's the right thing. And yet sometimes I don't listen to it. I doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I know I have to do that, that's And then a lot of what we understand is with the louder the outside voices were, um, the softer the voice. We stop trusting the voice internally,
Right.
right? And that the journey is to come back to listening to that inner voice and tuning into that inner voice by softening the voices that are there in the mind, right? To soften the voices of the critic and the this and the that,
Especially the doubt.
especially the doubt, right? And to able to sit and in still, because what are we otherwise notice? Everyone's doing, everyone's distracted, there's anxiety, there's this, there's that, because all of us are repressing that voice. That is our natural state. Because I was like, your natural state is balanced. Your natural homeostasis is balance. It's joy, it's happiness anyway, it's stillness by design.
Mhm.
But when you're not, when you're away from that the most, is because you're living in your mind so much. You're disconnected from your body and that and the sound of your inner voice.
And let me just say, that doesn't mean that everything is aligned and perfect in your life,
Mm-hmm.
because you may have a karma to suffer a cancer, and that's going to have to manifest through your body, and it's going to go into that level of the physical body. And yet the way you can battle through that, it can be a dharmic way, and you can be peaceful within, and you can bring, maybe you even suffer the ultimate consequence in this body to die through it. But through the process, you can heal yourself, not uh, how do you say that, cure yourself, but you can heal yourself, and you can heal the family. How often do we see somebody getting a cancer in a family and everybody coming in to support? And people who didn't speak for years, people who were distant in other countries, they come together and they get together, they have family meetings, they get under the support that they receive. And you can feel the whole family healing old wounds from an incredibly painful disease. So the fact that when we are talking about the nature and being in tune with our nature and how there is a peace to that, and there is these beautiful things that you are mentioning, that doesn't take away that there's going to be karmas coming in. As long as we are in this lifetime, there's going to be karmas happening. So just because, I just want to mention, if a karma comes to you, like for example a cancer, that does not mean that we are misaligned. That doesn't mean necessarily that we are not aligned with Dharma. That just means it's a karma that has to go away. It just has to release itself. So don't take that as a judgment when we have a disease, or, oh, I'm doing something wrong because
Mm-hmm.
I'm having this disease. I mean, it's good to always check, right? Because there is such a thing as psychosomatic disorders, and there's all sort of influences between the different levels. Am I fine on my emotional level, on my psychological level? Is everything aligned? Okay. If not, I correct it. But otherwise, okay, fine. But at the same time, don't take it like something karmic is happening. That means I'm doing something wrong. Right? That's the doubt. Coming back to the doubt. Yeah.
Right. But it's also, even if there is a dharmic, there is a quality, the quality of your response can become dharmic. And that's
Right.
right. Or how
Correct.
you respond to
Correct.
that experience is
Correct.
transforms that experience completely. Does it mean
Correct.
it
Correct.
takes cancer away? Probably not, but it definitely aids in the healing process. It
And
aids.
it can actually make it go away. But if you try to change your attitude to make it go away, like that, that doesn't work like that so well, no? Because then you have an interest. You are not neutral. You are trying. I'm trying to change my attitude so that this thing happens. No, it's like there's too much ego in there.
Yeah. So as long as there is an agenda or a plan or a strategy, then that's the ego.
Yeah,
Uh,
correct.
there's some conspiring going on there that if I do this, then it's pretty much the transaction of the ego looking for its outcome and its reward.
Yeah, you
Uh,
see that a lot in couples, right? One of them, I'm gonna change the way I talk to her so that she changes that, right? Well, then you're just wanting to change her, right? You're not trying to change yourself so that that have an impact on the couple. You're trying to change her, so you're trying to manipulate. How can I do it to change her? That's
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's constantly happening in all our relationships because we're looking for an outcome and a reward versus the dharmic response, which is to observe the quality of your response without expecting anything to go away, change, whatever, but you're able to be in that experience from a space of neutrality, which is very hard. It's I don't know how to be
yeah.
with cancer and be neutral at the same time. I don't know what how to do that or um in in such a situation, for example. I think these things maybe in hindsight you possibly can, but it would be interesting to me to see if there are people who are able to go through that with neutrality and that deep understanding. Because I was reading a book about the compassionate intention of illness, that its intention is to bring your awareness to a part or an aspect of you that needs to be seen, that is not being seen. It could be gratitude for life, for example, or whatever it could be. That there is a compassionate intention to the illness of the body. And now there's a lot of research with trauma around the body keep the score and Gabor Mate's The Body Says No, where they say that a lot of these current illnesses like autoimmune and things like that is the body's response to a lot of repression of emotions, trauma, because essentially when that happens, your nervous system loses its balance, and you're coming out of your homeostasis into either hyper or hyper arousal, and you're constantly living from that. And that by itself is dis-ease, and that is disease. And that it's probably bringing your awareness to slow down your life and eat healthier and take care of yourself and give yourself what your body needs or your soul needs. So many people relook at life like COVID did for a lot of people. They started questioning, is this the kind of life I want to live? Right? A lot of people left big corporate jobs and started living in different lives and saying, hey, this is what I always wanted to do. I'm going to listen to my heart now. So much of that, I'm not saying that COVID was easy or that was, but I'm saying I did see a lot of people who use this as a pivot to how they were approaching life and their understanding of it.
Mm.
That why was I chasing this when, actually, to me, this is of meaning, spending time with my family, and I'm going to cut down my work hours and spend more time with family. Example.
Mm. Yep.
And it was really interesting I'm just going to add this one more thing was there was this gentleman who was getting this lifetime achievement on this big like businessman in India, and they asked him, hey, we have one question for you. If there was if there's one bit that you would share being one of the biggest businessmen in India, what would you share as this lifetime achievement award? And his response was, I wish I had worked less and spent more time with my family.
Yeah. How many people say that actually?
And
When,
I guess everybody was expecting a very different response, right?
yeah.
Not to say that one is better than the other, but then you relook and recalibrate, and you look at it from more consciousness and awareness of how are we being in this world or are we just doing? And when you come back to being, is that a different experience of dharma and consciousness than the doing, constantly doing? And that's possibly what's making us sick today.
How much we do to compensate for some emptiness or some lack inside
Yeah.
as a compensation. Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
compensations never work.
Yeah. And yet we think that's what, and it always boils down to at least what we see in is this belief that I am not worthy and I'm not enough, and it's this worthiness and I'm not deserving, and the whole journey of all of this is to come back to how you were always whole and the
Comes
wholeness.
back to the concept of feeling guilty.
Mm,
If I feel not worthy, it's because I feel guilty of something and I need to be punished as well.
mm,
That's why the concept of forgiveness is so essential. Even though, you can approach it like, okay, change your perspective of there's nothing to forgive. But at the same time, we chose to feel guilty,
Mm.
and we chose to feel worthless or not worthy. And okay, I need to forgive myself for having chosen that. Not that I'm guilty of doing anything else or having, like you were talking about abuse, somebody who suffers abuse and then they're feeling guilty. I'm not saying they are guilty of having done anything, but they chose to feel guilty. I mean, it was a subconscious choice, and the child is innocent and all that we say. But now, as adults, we look back and we have to choose to let go of all that and to forgive whatever is there to forgive, and come back to the innocence. Otherwise, from that perspective of guilt, that's it. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve love. I don't. And then we try to compensate by whatever, becoming a businessman and being very successful, whatever success means in my field. No,
Yeah.
I'm,
And I
ve- I'm very dysfunctional.
yeah, and I think that's so many books are today being written about that
Yeah.
and questioning that thing. But I think such an important aspect that I want to like be in the interest of time, just bringing that back is the word choice.
Mm.
That so much of what we talked about, karma, victim, forgiveness, that when we take that as absolute, then we take away from ourselves the power of choice. And choice is what changes a lot when I'm aware of my choices, that I do have a choice in this action. So many times I hear people, I don't have a choice. And like, but you always
and
have.
and that is to your duty,
Yeah.
because it's our duty in a way. Our job is to be choosers, to be the ones who are conscious beings, affecting like conscious actions in the world. That's our duty, to align ourselves to Dharma and to know what is my Dharma, my path, my. I am a violin in this orchestra, and the violin maybe is I'm a humble shoemaker, but doing it with all the dignity of a shoemaker, and that is your music in this universe, in this symphony. And that's my duty, to be there, the best shoemaker I can be, and to make it align with the all what the spiritual teachings say. So that's the duty that Krishna speaks about, I think,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
choice. Choose to do that. That takes responsibility a lot. That's very heavy. Many people don't want to do that.
Yeah. That's what Dharma is. I think when you say responsibility, that you're choosing with consciousness and that you do have a choice, and that as long as we remain unconscious, we will blame and we'll put it on somebody else. And that also makes us powerless. And it may be true in a lot of situations when you're living in anarchy and things like that. That's different. But on a day to day, in a moment to moment, to become conscious of the choices of what we think, what we say, and what we do.
And one more thing as well. No matter what happens, no matter how terrible the situation, no matter how little maneuver do I think I have for choosing, because everything is happening in this way, I have no choice, right? Like the struggles to keep a family afloat and not having money and having to work 3 jobs and being like, how can I choose anything? I cannot drop a war a cho- I sorry, I cannot drop a job to just do more yoga or whatever, because I cannot. I have to support. No matter how difficult the situation may be, no matter how narrow the possibilities seem, we can always change our attitude. So that's a definite choice. We say in your attitude of gratitude. So whatever it is, count your blessings, don't count your curses. Attitude of gratitude, that is the minimum amount of choice we always have in any situation.
Right. And actually, that changes our perspective from not enough and lack to gratitude and enough. And that in itself is a different way of leading life, I think, than the other one. And that is a choice.
It's like let the Muslims say, Inshallah, right?
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that feels like a a whole place to come to a semblance of closing our podcast today. What do you feel, Ardasji?
Yes, definitely. Remind us what will be the next topic. I think it's going to be your favorite, isn't it?
Uh, it's about truth.
Yes.
Conscious choice, awareness, and truth. Um,
Right.
I invite you all next week, Friday at 5:30 India, 1 p.m. Portugal. Join us with your questions, interact with us. We'd love your questions. If you can't be there, send us your questions earlier on. You can send it to admin@safe-space.in. We'd love to answer any of your questions, post them to Ardaas ji, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes. I look forward to seeing you too.
Thank you.
So, no, thank you, everyone.